97X, the Quad Cities Classic Rock Authority, and Aerosmith with Last Child. It's time for Rock Club, a book club, but for albums, where we give you some assigned listening, and you, in turn, have an excuse to carve out some time and be intentional about listening to music. This week's Rock Club featured album was the fourth studio album from the bad boys from Boston, Aerosmith, Rocks. This 1976 album spawned classic rock mainstays like Back in the Saddle and Last Child, which we just heard, along with some fan favorites like Combination and Rats in the Cellar. When it came out, reviews were harsh. Rolling Stone said Rocks was a pale remake of their earlier hits, and the Village Voice called them a Zeppelin imitation. It is possible, though, that Rocks is when Aerosmith began to kind of lose steam. It's easy to understand because then it was followed up by Draw the Line, Night in the Ruts, and Rock in a Hard Place, which is kind of, it's almost the perfect bottom of the list of best to worst Aerosmith records. And that being said, there's a ton of musicians enjoyed Rocks, and they were super influential. Slash from Guns N' Roses, James Hetfield from Metallica says that that album in particular made them want to learn how to play guitar. Kurt Cobain had Rocks on the list of favorite albums as well. And while the next decade watched Aerosmith dive into drugs and people leaving the band, Rocks was a raw, kick-ass rock album that remains on my list of favorites to this day. That being said, it had been a while since I'd listened to the album front to back, so let's jump everybody over to Facebook Live. I'm on there at 97X Radio. And we'll dive a little deeper. If you want to join the conversation, I'd love to have you. 323-9797, or just type into Facebook, and I'll try to read your stuff. I've got 5 pages of notes. So, you know, I'm taking it a little seriously, guys. This is the Rock Club book club for albums. So jump over online at 97X Radio on Facebook, and let's chat about Aerosmith Rocks with 97X.
The Quad Cities Classic Rock Authority.
All right. Now we are on Facebook Live. What I'll do is I'll just kind of give an idea on what my thoughts were. If you want to join in, if you want to add to the conversation, just type in your stuff on Facebook, and I'll read some comments. If you want to call, I'd love to have you there as well. 323-9797. So when was it? Last Friday is when I sat down to watch or to listen to Rocks. Before then, it had been a while. Probably 10 years since I actually sat down and listened to it. You know, life happens. Life happens. So this is part of the reason I came up with this, is to have a real reason to sit down and listen to music and enjoy it. So Friday, my sister came over to the house, and we were having some beers. A little bit later on, they all went up to bed. And so I sat down at the table about 10 beers in and started playing Rocks. Now, I didn't want to go upstairs and bug everybody because that's where my CD collection is. So I just streamed it from my phone and started taking notes. So I fired up on Amazon Music, and pretty soon I'm interrupted. The 7-year-old boy comes down the stairs. All right. That's how it goes. That's why you have to carve time out for this sort of thing. Put him on the couch, and I ain't turning the thing down. I'm not turning the music down. If it's bugging you, go upstairs. So on first blush, I'm kind of excited about this album. It's one of my favorites. It's Aerosmith, I think, played it in Alpine Valley a few years back, and a bunch of my friends went, and a bunch of my friends rubbed it in my face that they played the whole album front to back. So I immediately was bummed out that I didn't get to go to that concert. But it's one of my favorites of all time. I mentioned on Dwayne Michaels this morning that my first recollection of the album was probably in 1990. Being a big Guns N' Roses geek, I had heard the story of Slash chasing this girl and finally tracking her down and being able to go over to her house and hang out with her. And as soon as she put on Rocks, it was over. He's like, I'm I'm into this record way more than I am you. So I'm like, I have to listen to this album. I got to know what Rocks is about. I'd known Aerosmith. That was around the Pump era. So they had their comeback already, and I needed to dive a little bit more into it. So, you can't you can't compete with album opener. Back in the Saddle. It's just a killer rock opener. Last Child, rock radio royalty. Those two songs are huge. I remember playing them back in the day when I was on 97X, and I started in 96. And I remember playing Last Child and Nobody's Fault. Oh man, just a really good. Oh, I have the album right here. Just a really good album. Liz, she says, I feel you're speaking directly to me. Gotta carve out some time for what we love. Music matter. I mean, that's exactly right. Music does matter. So if you find a time to sit down and listen to music, and if this is your excuse to do that, then that's even better. Mike Becker says, Rocks edges out Toys by a hair. It's their best album, in my opinion. Rats in the Cellar, Nobody's Fault. I mean, it's all epic. Rats in the Cellar is such a punky song. And I got to think, being 76 is when that came out, you got to wonder if that that fire of Rats in the Cellar came from what was going on in New York and that underground punk scene. I wonder if there was any inspiration. I know David Johansen was at the end of Back in the Saddle. You hear the jangling of the Spurs. That's Steven Tyler and David Johansen from the New York Dolls. So I think I'm right. I always do. And then Combination, just such a great tune with harmonies that kill to this day. The Toxic Twins backing each other up. It's such a great song right there. Sick as a Dog, beautiful harmonies again with a monster riff that doesn't need it. I wish I could play the album. Facebook will shut me right down if I try to do that. So I guess we'll just have to play along at home. Throw it on a CD player. Nobody's Fault. This is when I was listening to it on Friday, I went, this album's a lot darker than I remember it being. And as a whole, you can tell they're not exactly in a great space mentally. They are not doing great mentally. So a dark album, which plays into why I love it, I guess. It's got that raw kind of vibe, so I love that. Get the Lead Out, and I love me some Aerosmith grooviness. And don't forget, 1976, the height of the disco era. Steven Tyler was listening to disco. Just because there was a girl in the room, he was listening to disco. So I'm sure that translated a little bit into the grooviness of Get the Lead Out. And it kind of reminds me of where they landed on the next few albums. Draw the Line has a huge kind of disco feel. Even Kramer has that hi-hat riff of the disco. And it's like different producer, different time. And that would have been a lot different. Anyway, Lickin' a Promise, a great storytelling song about the rock and roll lifestyle. It's probably my least favorite song on the album. It reminds me of No Surprise from Night in the Ruts, where they're just telling about, hey, I ran into a record rep, and boy, this is what happened, and we went to a bar, and I don't know, it just falls flat for me. I don't like the so literal storytelling of those types of songs, but that's just me. Home Tonight, I think, is a great album closer, especially on Friday night when the whole family was in bed, passed out. My sister upstairs on the bottom bunk bed, because she can't. She's almost 50. She's not going on the top bunk bed. So I think Home Tonight was a great album closer. So this is kind of when they were still doing drugs. This was when they were deep into it. Bill Michaels said is they were not done with mirrors at this point. Joe Perry says it's when drugs were still working for them. And then the next few years, it was pretty obvious that it took a toll on the creative side, and it didn't do them any good. If you were following along with some of the Facebook posts, there was a lot of really great thoughts about this. Sweet J says he listened to the album 5 times while freezing his balls off outside. So thanks for your dedication to that one, Sweet J. He says 7 out of 10. It would be 8 out of 10 if he was on the same stuff as they were in 76. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. He says the best song was Last Child. The worst song was Nobody's Fault. It's one of my favorite songs. I'd love to understand why you don't like Nobody's Fault. He says Sick as a Dog would be good too, but if the chorus had better lyrics. So, yeah, thanks, Sweet J. Surapaz says, I can listen to Rocks without even turning it on. It's an imprinted album. And if nothing else, he gets his woman every night for free. He's out there rocking like you wouldn't believe is one of the best rock and roll lyrics from a different era. That is for sure. Wayne says, I remember throwing in the 8-track and forgetting about it over and over and over. Great memories with this one. Mr. Billy Piper says he recalls the time they came to the Adler Theater, and a few short years later, Aerosmith was terribly addicted to drugs. So he says that was a great show, though. Colin says Nobody's Fault is lights out. I think that means good. I think it means good. George says he's been listening to it steadily since it was released. So that's cool. Justin Jones says he's been to hundreds of concerts, but Aerosmith is still on the bucket list. One of the best live shows ever, that's for sure. Matt Mudd says it's their best album. Talking about some songs. Dwyer gave a nice review. He says Home Tonight is his least favorite Aerosmith song of all time. Least favorite of all time? Home Tonight? Worse than Trip Hoppin'? I've got an album I want you to listen to, and I want you to compare it to Home Tonight. I think it's not the worst album, song of all time. Dwyer says, this album blows any dust off the idea that Aerosmith was going to settle into a friendlier style of rock just because they had a radio smash with Toys in the Attic the previous year. And he also mentions that Rats in the Cellar sounds very much like Toys in the Attic, and he says if he's speculating, it was probably going to close the previous album. That would be interesting. I always kind of thought of it was like they went against the grain of Toys in the Attic. What's the opposite of Toys in the Attics? Rats in the Cellar is how I kind of took that. Dwyer also says the twin guitars on here are pretty forceful, maybe the best of their career. Yeah, it's Brad Whitford is just, I think he's one of the most underrated guitarists of all time. Joe Perry gets all the love and attention, but I think that Brad is the silent killer of that band. Here's how you can kind of tell the difference between the two of them. Usually when it's Brad, he's got his chord theory and note theory, and it's very bluesy and kind of tonality is a little bit deeper. Joe's whacking off a lot. I love Joe Perry. He's one of my favorites of all time, but he's just kind of going crazy. He's doing well. Hey, turn me up, man. I got something good. Also, Dwyer says, while Joey Kramer and Tom Hamilton are probably the best rhythm section in rock about this time, not as sloppy as Zeppelin and not as tight as Queen. Tyler's vocals really soar on Rocks, between being downright gritty on songs like Last Child and the effects-laden combination he harmonizes. Yeah, I mean, the combination harmonizing is just I'm sure more of my music nerd guys will be able to say the exact phrasing of what kind of harmonizing that is, but it's just so cool where it's almost like one tone and the other guy's going up and down and hitting all the melodic melody parts of it. So Dwyer goes on to say that Steven Tyler sings a lot of cliches. He says, I know he didn't write them all, but the cuteness of it kind of got old for me. In 76, were they cliches? Or is Steven Tyler part of the reason they became cliches? He's part of the reason that so many people used those phrases that became cliches. It's a cliche for a reason. I don't know. That's kind of my take on that. Aerosmith rocks. I don't have a real wrap-up. Nobody's calling in. So if you guys like this, make sure you let me know. I'd love to keep doing this. It was a lot of fun to kind of dig into an album that I hadn't heard for a while and really kind of dust off an album out of my collection. And it's something I definitely will continue to do, whether we do this Facebook Live thing, whether you guys participate. Maybe I'll just put out a post on Facebook and maybe do a quick live video. And you guys, please throw in your comments and let's keep this thing going. I'm always loving to hear your side of the story for Aerosmith Rocks. So I'm not exactly sure what we're going to do for next week. I'll let you know tomorrow on the Bill Stage Radio Show. I'll have it ready for us, the announcement tomorrow afternoon. I've got a couple in mind, so always looking for suggestions, too. If you guys want to hear something, just let me know what you think would be a good album for everybody to listen. The Book Club for albums, RockClub. Mike says, dust off Sabbath, Heaven and Hell. That's a great one. It's been a long time for me, so I'll put it on the list. That's for sure. We've got a lot to pick from. It's something we could probably do for years to come. Every single week, just throw out an idea for RockClub, and everybody just dive in. Thanks to everybody who participated with this. It's really cool to have so many notes on Facebook and on Twitter and the like. And let me know if you want to keep doing this sort of thing. The format's probably going to change just because it's. I think of it as being a living, breathing unit. We're gonna figure out how best to do this. I'd love to do this live, where Facebook isn't going to be shutting down the music. Like meet up at a bar and just crank the album from front to back, have a few beers, and then just sit around and BS. I'm just looking for a reason to get out and drink some beer and listen to music. It's a good idea. So, I don't know. Let me know what you guys thought. RockClub, the book club for albums. And that's all I got.